All right, welcome back to another episode of Culture Camp. I have Leigh, Quinn, and David Spader from Potentia. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Great to be here, Jason.
Great to be back.
This is some of my favorite episodes. I've got a lot of great feedback. As of right now, we've had one of the episodes launched. I had a ton of people reach out. It's just been awesome. I've listened to them back, and I absolutely love what we're doing because I think that so many people need to hear this, and a lot of businesses right now, especially what we've talked about going on in the world and in times right now, they need a lot of what Leigh and David, you guys you're talking about. So I just appreciate you being on the show. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting subject. I think that a lot of people think they know what we're about to talk about, but they've never quantifiably probably put it there. We're going to talk about the talent balance sheet. So I want to know from you guys, what is a talent balance sheet? Because I don't think many people have actually heard this term before.
Well, we'll start with the big picture, which is really it's your assets and liabilities from your human capital. So every individual, every team, every group has talents and they have opportunities, which those opportunities are liabilities until they become new talents.
Right.
Okay. And so when we use the term liability, we don't mean it as a negative or something that can't change. Just like on a financial balance sheet, you can take a liability and it can become an asset over time. And
Right.
so what we want to do, though, as leaders in our organization and as consultants for organizations is identify those resources and assets we can leverage and make sure we're using those well with regards to our people. Okay.
Right.
And also, where are those liabilities and how do I manage those liabilities so those liabilities don't hurt my organization? And so at its basic level, it's that, and it's a graphic representation. So you can take a look at it on one sheet of paper, whether it's your whole organization or we really see it most beneficial in smaller groups like a leadership team or maybe even a department or a change management team. You can look at it right away and very quickly, if you know what to look for, you say, there are my assets, there are my liabilities. I may even put names on them for certain situations.
Right. That's interesting. Do you want, so think like balance sheets most of the time are supposed to balance, right? I mean, that's the hope. It's supposed to net it, even there. Some not, but do you want the assets and liabilities to basically be like a even or wash, or like the same amount of assets, the same amount of liabilities, depending on the situation of where the organization's going?
Well, there's two questions there. So the first one is, should they balance? And roughly they should. And this is why. Because while our capabilities, we can continue to grow and expand those, when you look at it from a motivation side, we're not going to love everything. Okay.
Right.
And so you're not likely to enjoy all types of work or be passionate about every situation your organization is facing. And so if you don't understand that there are liabilities about what people can and can't do, which are capabilities, and will or won't or like and don't like to do, those liabilities, you're not going to be managing effectively, or you're not seeing it clearly. If everybody
Right.
says, yes, boss, we love everything, every piece of work you throw at us, whether it's task-oriented or people-oriented, whether it's more structured or unstructured, whether it requires to be more flexible, less flexible, I love it all. Somebody's not being honest with themselves. Okay. And so as human beings, we can't be good at everything. We can't love everything. And so it's really about understanding where those assets and liabilities are.
I love that. And I don't think that they always say surround yourself with the right people, right? But how do you quantify that? Or how do you put that down where it's data? That I think that's really interesting what you guys have done, because I think that there's so many times where you think something or you feel something, and then you look at the data and you look at actually, you take a step back and you look at what's actually going on, and you're like, wow, like if we're trying to get to a goal or we're trying to go somewhere, and I have people surrounded me, that are technically, maybe a liability to that goal, then we just have to make it. Now, I'm not saying let them go and fire them, but we just have to understand what, even if we're not accomplishing a goal, why are we not accomplishing the goal, right?
But you said something important there too. If it's a liability to invest in it, or is it something that maybe we divest ourselves? Worst case scenario. And when I say divest, I don't want to sound impersonal. One of the most compassionate things we can do as leaders is help someone understand when we're in a role that doesn't fit with where they want to go. or they're
Right.
not capable of performing. We can't do every role. I know I certainly know I can't.
Right.
My wife's a brain surgeon, so I really know that I could not do what she does.
Right.
It's not in me, and you wouldn't want to try and get me there.
Right.
And so it's just acknowledging that, okay, this might not be the right fit. So let's find another fit that's better for you, internal or external to our organization, and do that compassionately and with support, and in a way that hopefully everybody can win over time.
Yeah, and if we
I love
can
that.
take a look at it in the same light with a higher context to it, understanding as an organization, are you growth focused or stability focused? And it depends on what you're trying to achieve as an organization. And with that, there's certain motivations and capabilities for someone or an organization that's growth motivated versus some organization that's stability motivated. And you have to understand assets and liabilities there. So for example, right, we're into AI. Now imagine a year ago how deep were most of these companies into AI. It was a conversation. People were playing around with it, testing it out. But now what's happening is in certain sectors of an organization, they have to accelerate their ability actually to use what AI can bring to them. So are the people motivated and capable to actually move at the pace that needs to happen? While at the same time, there's still parts of the organization you need to keep at a stable pace where you need to maintain your current processes. So, what David's talking about is extremely unique. Like someone would look at, like you as a CEO of a business, Jason, you'd be looking at your assets and liabilities on a regular basis. Well, why
Right.
don't we do that with human capital? And why aren't we consciously managing that on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and making it clear to people, as David says, is we don't want people to be surprised. But if people understand where they fit and where their strengths are in the organization, and we're doing our best to align them with that, and like David also said, not everything we do is something we enjoy. There are parts of our job, our must haves, because we're in that role. As long as they are not the primary thing we have to do, then our energy will be okay. If that must have, let's say, for example, like someone like me, sure, I can read a spreadsheet. I love looking at a balance sheet, but do I want to build one? Do I want to spend the time digging the details in the background? Yes, I'll ask the questions, but where would I prefer being as out engaging with either a client or with a team to discuss how we're going to advance things.
Right.
And so putting me in a room doing analysis, after a while, I'm not going to do well for the company, and the company's not going to get the output of performance they're going to need from somebody like me. So why
Right.
not have that conversation up front?
So Leigh, would that be why I put together the presentation and slides we're going to share in a little bit, and while you were out working with clients,
That's exactly why I did.
100%.
doing the analysis, making sure we're going to talk about, be on the same page about our talking points? Yeah.
And
So
no,
that's
it's
actually a
so
good
interesting.
example of that. We think about this on a regular basis internally about, well, who's best fit to do that? And it's not always the person that's most capable. It's also a major component is who's more motivated, who's going to get energy from that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that people ask of me, and it's like, well, can you do this? I can do it.
Mhm.
Is it going to take me 100 times longer to do it because I don't like to do it? Yes. Like the most simple tasks of like, it's funny, like I hate like mailing stuff. And so it's like, if you ask me to mail you a check somewhere, yeah, you're probably not going to get paid for 6 months. But if you ask me to ACH it, sure, I'll go on and hurry and do it in my computer or whatever. But like, it's just like there's so many tasks that I'm just like I don't love. But like I have some people, like my wife is like very like, oh, I love like mailing things, and like I'll take care of it. And I'm like, this is so weird. But like I mean, that's a really small thing. But there's a lot of big things that, especially with like, I'll say leadership or entrepreneurs or, CEOs, we try to say yes, 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 yes. But then it starts to become like death by yeses, where now everything's starting, and then you start to become the the,
Great
the
point.
blocker of the organization, and then you start to become the biggest liability to your organization without even realizing it.
Yeah, and that's Leigh and I were talking and about the stages of an organization's growth as well. And so Leigh made a great point about, early on, that entrepreneurial spirit is great to have on your leadership team. And it's that flexibility, quick moving, capturing all opportunities, being highly nimble. But as you start to grow, an organization needs more structure and process orientation internally. And
Right.
so it needs to be balanced. So that's a great example if you want to have an asset and a liability. If everybody's entrepreneurial, well, you're not going to build the processes and back end to have the stability to continue to grow effectively. But the flip side's also true. If everybody moves with stability and process orientation and fixed processes that never change as the organization grows, guess what? The organization's not going to grow. And so you need the asset and the liability to balance each other out in those environments, because at different times, as Leigh was mentioning, in a growth orientation, certain motivations and capabilities are going to be more critical. But we know that annually, less than annually, sometimes monthly or even daily in highly dynamic environments, we might need to shift those talents. What the talent balance sheet allows you to do is say, hey, I've got Jason with these talents over here. Today, we're looking at opportunities. And I've got Leigh over here when we're looking at stabilizing and creating consistency and repetition and routines over here. And so I'm going to lean on Leigh in these types of situations. I'm going to lean on Jason and his capabilities in these types of. So it's not that, oh, we need to replace Jason or Leigh because the environment changed. No, it's let's look internally and figure out how to leverage the strengths of the people we have first
Right.
and foremost, because oftentimes you don't need to look externally for that.
Right.
And too often organizations start doing that, and then it becomes a revolving door of people that are just there for a couple years. And that doesn't work out well.
Right. And I mean, you see it a lot of times in large companies, right? They bring in organizational teams for if they have a goal, they want to grow in a market, or they want to grow, a international market. They'll bring in, international CEO, or they'll bring in a new CEO to get some new lifeblood or whatever. I mean, we see this a lot in founders. Like I, know the guys who founded or owned Crumble, right? They just did a big post that's like, we're exiting the leadership of Crumble. We're placing in a COO, a president, and a CEO, and we're going to go back to being founders in startups like we love to do, because we're not necessarily the two best guys to run the company. I mean, they got it to $1 billion, which I think is unbelievable. But I mean, I think that takes a lot of guts to say it's kind of beyond my capabilities. I need to bring someone in to run it. And you're right. Like maybe they're probably more, let's stabilize, because I've heard there's a lot of stuff going on in the cookie market right now. So they're probably bringing in, let's bring someone in, stabilize it. They don't have any, emotional connection to anything. They're just going to come in, look at numbers, stabilize, and do their thing. But I think a lot of companies don't necessarily pay attention to that until sometimes it's too late.
And what's great about what they're doing is it's proactive. So they're
Right.
realizing, hey, there's a point in this organization where we're not the right team anymore. Right. And so that makes sense when you can do that for 5-7 years. There's a reason really great turnaround artists move around. And in a totally different industry, I remember when I was in college, I worked at a summer youth camp, and there's a camp director who had come in, and he had been there for about 4 years. And he said, I've got 1, maybe 2 more years. And we're saying, why? You took this camp from literally not being able to pay the bills to now it's financially healthy. There are new buildings going up. They're doing some really cool things. All sorts of fun stuff's happening. He's like, yeah. And as soon as I have to stop building and growing, he's like, it kills me. He's like, I get so bored so fast. That's why I got this guy right here behind me, who is a stability guy, who's going to be able to sustain everything we have here and continue to strengthen it and build those relationships. I will start breaking things simply because I'm bored if you keep me here.
Yeah. And
And he's like, I learned that.
Yeah, and what Dave is talking about, and you are, Jason, has to do with a component of our talent balance sheet is adaptability. So if you get great foresight and vision, such as what you were talking about with Crumble and Dave's talking with the camp, you're going to anticipate things and you're going to be willing to make that change. And then you might have to look for others to fill in the blank, to have the capabilities to fill in what you need to be able to achieve the outcome that you have. And that's why each aspect of the talent balance sheet has a purpose. And sometimes certain components of a motivation or capability aren't needed within what we're talking about, and other aspects of it are. So,
Right.
I'll hand it over to David so he could get into more detail with us on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing that I want to know is like how do organizations use this, or how would I use this, or how do consultants use this talent balance sheet? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so we can show, for those who are able to see it, we can show an example of one here with an organization and a group, disguised group we've worked with here. So right away you can see lighter and darker components around each of 40 factors: capabilities on the left, motivations on the right. So we've got a lot of different assets and liabilities within the organization. And so it's a lot right away. And as Leigh said, you don't always need to understand all of it. But once you understand how to read this, it's going to help you make a lot of decisions. And so know that, again, it's on whether it's a group or an individual, will be able to have a lot of different insights. So I think it might be helpful, Jason, just to go through this one as an example. What are some of the
Absolutely.
ways that an organization can use it? Because it's really multifaceted.
Yeah, let's get into it, because I think this is where kind of the rubber meets the road in a lot of, especially with, right now, where there's going to be some teams wondering, where do we go? And some consultants out there is like, even where do I start helping? I mean, this kind of like, I mean, I hate to say it's a cheat sheet for consultants, but like, take this sheet and then we start coaching off the sheet. I love it.
Absolutely. So one of the things is that when starting with a group, you'll notice we've been talking a lot about DISC in previous sessions, DISC, upper right-hand corner motivations. You'll see it up there. So those are 4 of the 40 factors we're going to look at. But if Leigh and I are working with the group, that's not where we're going to start as far as understanding what are the assets and liabilities. We're actually going to go to effective emotions.
Okay.
Okay. And because if whether you're more positive or negative is going to have a lot of impact on every other capability and motivation. And so that's kind of the broad envelope we want to put around all the other factors of, are we looking at this from a more primarily a positive or negative viewpoint? And so we've
Right.
got 6 different roles here. And one of the things we can see here is we've got 2 individuals, our technology officer and HR officer, which you can see are darker. So they tend to be stronger. They're more assets when it comes to understanding and effectively manage their emotions and the emotions of others. So those are our resources. Now, unfortunately, not everyone on the team is perfectly strong here. And so where might a few of our liabilities be?
And then also the COO is struggling.
The COO is really struggling,
Yeah, the
but
CEO too.
yeah. And interestingly enough, when we look at those different components, without going into a super deep dive here, we see that the CEO, one of the strengths is emotional confidence, right, for
Right.
the CEO. But we see almost all the other factors not very strong. So while that CEO is personally, internally confident, a lot of what's being non-verbally and verbally expressed outwardly is more likely to be more neutral or negative. And so now the chief spokesperson, internally and externally, isn't emanating the positive emotional aura, so to speak, and energy. And so what's the likelihood the organization's going to be?
Way more negative, more, that,
Yeah, and
yeah.
if we take and we also add to this, let's say this is a growth-oriented organization, not a stability organization. So, what forms of effective emotions or components do you think, or factors do you think you need? Well, growing would be pretty
Growing,
good, wouldn't it?
right. Being proactive. I mean, accepting. He's got okay accepting, but and
Right.
then yeah, connecting, because you got to connect to get everybody on board to be able
Hmm.
to grow and move forward.
And so
Right.
we've got a ratio of 1 to 2 for connecting, about 1 to 2 for growing. So is that positive? 1 asset to 2 liabilities with regards to whether we're more growing or struggling, whether we're more connecting or not. So right away we can see our liability here is a concern.
Hmm.
Right. No, for sure. Absolutely.
It doesn't have to continue to be a liability. That's the nice thing. This is the capability side, so we can develop this. This is one of those factors that you can change, and oftentimes relatively quickly when we learn the right techniques to do so. So with this group, I can think of an ownership group a few years back I was working with, and it was several merged organizations that industry consolidation was really pressuring this industry. And so I walked into a room of 15 owners who 10 years ago had all been sole proprietors, had all owned their own business, who are now trying to work together.
Wow.
And they were really struggling. And so I walked into the room, and have you ever walked into a room before where you can feel the tension?
Oh
You
yeah.
almost cut it with a knife. I
Oh yeah.
walked in and I just about turned around and walked out and thought, this might not be worth it.
Right. That's
These
funny.
people couldn't look each other in the eye. Their frustration was so palpable, it just hung heavy in the room. And I thought, if we don't turn something around, the next 3 days are going to be brutal with all of
Right.
us. And so, fortunately, um, we were able to quickly turn them around with as a coach and consultant very quickly to look at, hey, what do we all have in common? And so we went through a couple activities, and we saw very quickly that we had a lot more in common, and working together would clearly be to our benefit. And what are some things that we could do differently, like managing our emotions? And if we're more struggling than growing right now, what would it look like to grow? And we had that conversation. And so, okay, let's start there, because that feels like a good spot to start, to be growing instead of struggling from this situation. And so we went through some exercises there, and after about half hour, 45 minutes, the energy was changing in the room, and it felt okay. Now I feel like we're going to be able to get some work done.
Right. No, and I think that's huge. And I like I don't know if that happens without identifying those factors, right? Because I think that you have a lot of people, 15 people coming through. I think that they're all going to have their own opinions, and when when you have the data here that says here's what it is and here's what you have in common, and I think it's like, oh yeah, like okay, I can accept that. And I think that understanding the organization better and the goal better, and where you're poised in the position to be able to accomplish the goal, I mean, I think is huge, and I think this is
Well, what's nice
awesome,
about this,
right?
Jason, too, is just imagine, like David's framing it up, is you can have a dialogue around this, like he did
Right.
with, and you can do it with a large group or with individuals. And as a consultant or as a coach, our job is not to say, this is who you are, is to say, let's talk about what this looks like. And
Right.
so if we're going to be growing, then are we pleased or displeased with the situation? Well, I'm
Right.
displeased with it. Well, how do you not struggle? Let's talk about what are you displeased about? And then what might you be struggling with, so we can make it so we can grow. And that's an awareness stage, making us aware, one, as an individual, to say what I might be challenged with this, but also with the others. And then self-awareness to say, what can I do about it? Like David says, I actually can do something pretty quickly. But
Right.
there's beyond this, I think David's got some really interesting information. I really like the way David framed this and put this together. It's wonderful in order to have a good conversation with clients. I think this is a great tool.
Yeah. No, let's keep diving into it, because I think that I mean, there's 40 is a lot, but I think it's, it's obviously it's needed, but I think that there's a lot of areas that, because there's so many different situations, right? And then we know there's, no day is like the last day. And so I think with, understanding this balance sheet, and I think it, awesome where we're starting is, how, in what situation, how can I respond, or what are we going to be like in all these different types of situations with my team? Because I think that a lot of people do stuff maybe individually, but I
Right.
think that the importance, like we just put on this effective emotions, like the CTO, like, how much impact, right? The HR, like how much impact, but then you go to the CEO, and it's like that one person is actually impacting quite a lot on the organization, and he's probably pointing to other people to make the, you make the change, but he's blocking the change, right? Like it's type of, going back and forth. I
Good
really
point.
like how what you've done is put together the entire team, because I always say, like, we win as a team, we lose as a team, and understanding how we operate as a team, I think, is very important. It's almost like militaristic, or whatever, how you say, or
Well,
say that, but I think
and
it's huge.
if you're a good leader, regardless of where you are in the organization, and you can start using the talent balance sheet to know who to put in the game at what time.
Right.
Right. That's really what it's all about. How do I leverage that? Okay. So we're really struggling right now. Who's really good at moving from a place of struggling to growing?
Right.
Right. And what do they do differently that they can share or maybe take control or lead the group through this particular aspect? And so we started in this with this group with a capability around effective emotions. Again, remember, it's a capability, emotions, because it can be learned how to use those to our benefit.
Right.
And because we all have them, we're emotional beings, not rational beings.
Right.
So then we would,
Absolutely.
with this group, we'd actually move to values next. And so what do we want to look at? And again, we'll look at a couple different components, but to simplify this, the type 1 and 2 tend to be more self-focused, and type 3 and 4 are more others focused. And so what we see here is the CFO, the darkest bar there, is more around us versus them, but meaning they're very focused on doing what's best for the organization. Okay. And not so much on that first one, not so much me focus or me then you focus, but we see both bars on the us and everybody win focus being the area. So we have a CFO who's really looking out for the organization. That's great. When they're
Right.
looking at the numbers, they're not thinking about their own bonus. They're thinking about, how do I make sure this organization stays healthy?
Right.
Pretty important to have that in that role.
Absolutely. 100%.
And so right away, that's it. But do we see consistently that across all the other factors, all the other people, it's a lot more mixed.
For
And
sure.
so when you have when you have me and we oriented values that both are strong, generally the me oriented takes over. So we see a ratio overall in this leadership group of about 1 to 2, meaning one we oriented values type to every 2 me oriented values types on the
Right.
team. So when times get tough, without stepping back, this team is likely to be more focused and concerned about, how does this impact me, not the organization. So I want to take care of me first, and then I may or may not worry about the organization second. Now, that
Right.
doesn't mean they have to fall into that pattern. As a matter of fact, I know Leigh is great at using organizational values at a time like this. That's why you have them. So you pull
Yes.
them out and you say, okay, this is what we believe in. Are we all going to operate by these? And how do we use that? Because these are we oriented values and how everybody wins. So that's a great example of, while there's a liability there, you can have tools, resources, and strategies to offset those in those particular times.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think that's really important for sure.
And that's the
Yeah.
other reason that David points out, Jason, why, and you built the values for your organization, you understand how to use them, is that's the difference between individual personal values versus organizational values. And that's why we believe so strongly that one of the first things we want to build with an organization are their values, because
Right.
everything else flows from there. So a great example would be if you go back to 2008, 2009, and you take a look at some of the companies that failed in the financial system. Well, they were all about profitability. But if they had integrity before profitability, and that's how they had to make the decision, they may not have invested or gotten involved in some of the activities that they did, which created a lot of their problems.
Right.
So the combination is important. As David said, this is a motivation. So while I can move somebody a little bit from this, helping them build their effective emotions would help them also translate in their ability to move more readily to an all focused or an us focused set of values. But if they're not motivated there, that's something to be aware of.
Right. And it's, I think it's important because I think, like, I mean, I'm just, reading back and forth with this, especially with that CEO, like understanding, himself. I think, as far as this example, I think that's very important that, hopefully there's organizational values that, he can adhere to, but knowing that he's, going to be a little bit more individualist, little more, and then you go back to the effective emotions, I think, just understanding and being aware. And then hopefully, like what you're talking, Leigh, a little bit earlier about adaptability, because I mean, with this situation, it's like, yeah, like, I mean, if I'm a consultant, I'm literally going to talk to the CEO, look him in the eye, and be like, "You adapt or die, man. I don't
Well,
know what to tell
David
you."
has a
Right?
nice
And one
way of talking about this. I like him to, he does a good way of addressing the me focused individuals. So,
Yeah, and one thing I also want to make really clear is that me-oriented values are not bad or wrong.
no, there's no bad.
Okay. Our values are what they are because of our life experiences and how we've been shaped both internally and externally. So they're socialized, come from our family and our environment and also chosen. And so they can change over time, but they are what we need to be psychologically healthy at that point in our life. So we don't judge right or wrong. There's better or worse fits for situations and whether we
Right.
get what we want out of life. So oftentimes with me oriented leaders in particular, we know in general, we oriented leaders are more effective than me oriented leaders. And there's research to back that. But does that mean that you have to be a we oriented leader to be effective? Not at all. As a matter of fact, if you're more adaptable, and you're more me oriented, you might realize, well, what's in my best interest as the CEO of this organization? Probably to galvanize the whole team, figure out how to solve this and get through this with the least amount of pain possible if we're in an unfavorable situation. And I actually win more by making sure I engage my team, look out for my whole team, take care of my entire company because they're going to have more commitment. They're going to have my back if I have their back. And so what's actually in my best interest is to put other people in front of myself sometimes.
Right.
Now, they may not think that way right away, but a highly adaptable, me oriented leader will figure that out really fast. And so they can be effective across situations. And it's great. We want everybody to win. So, me oriented people, we want those in our organizations too, because we want them to win.
Right. Well, it's like, that's, I mean, I hate to say it, but like sales guys, great. Yeah. Go crush it for
You
yourself. Like,
nail it. Yep.
go buy the newest car, go buy, whatever, and crush it. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing there is, adaptability and just understanding. Like, I think that, like, it's almost like communicating it to yourself, right? It's like, I understand how I am. I think, like, I mean, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I think every person in leadership really needs to understand how they operate and then work on adaptability and how I fit in and how we can move things forward in the organization. Because if you don't really understand and like know your tendencies, at least from my experience, I think it's way more difficult. Because if I can see your tendencies more than you can see your tendencies, it's going to be an unfavorable situation because I'm going to be telling you what you're maybe not the best fit for or not the best situation or like whatever that may be. It's going to be a lot more contentious than it is just, hey, let's understand how we are. There's no right or wrong. We're trying to put the right people in the right, on the right team. And like you said earlier, it's a coach, right? Like we are a sports team. There's not, 12 quarterbacks or 12, sorry,
And
11 quarterbacks out on the field. It's we're trying to put the team together.
it's also where do you invest, right? So,
Right.
okay, Jason, you may not have a certain capability today. Let's invest in that. And so, an example would be for this group, if we look at their adaptability. So, we started with the capability, went to motivation. Now we're back to another capability, and we can see as a team they're not too bad for flexibility. They've definitely got some opportunities, especially our CEO and CFO. But when it comes, so flexibility being the willingness to adapt and change, and then versatility, the actual ability. So while flexibility as a whole team could be viewed as a little bit more of an asset, versatility is a little bit more of a liability. So that would be an area where we're probably going to want to invest. Okay.
Right.
And unless you're in an industry that doesn't change. Okay.
Right.
So, if there's not much change going on, you may not need to be adaptable. I'm not sure what industry that would be these days.
Yeah, I was literally gonna try to think of something, but I'm like, man, with AI, like I was just talking to a lady in medical yesterday, and she's like, our whole platform is turned into AI. I'm like, that's crazy. Like this is wild. Like it's hitting it's here, it's now, it's everybody. And so I think right now, like especially with, as being a consultant, knowing that there's so much going on right now, that versatility is gonna be pretty big deal
Yeah.
in
And I
organization.
know it's interesting you mention the medical environment. I know Leigh's worked with a lot of organizations, smaller and larger, in the medical industry around adaptability. I'd like him to speak a little bit to what he's done with some different teams in that particular realm as well, particularly with adaptability, because Leigh's one of the best out there to help people grow their adaptability.
Thanks, David. In fact, I had a conversation today about it with somebody, an individual, wonderful leader, sort of been in the role 4 years, was given a lot more responsibility, has put in some practices around adapting yourself. A couple of areas on versatility that we looked at is one is changing her preferred approach to a certain decision or when it's needed. This individual is highly controlling as a cautious thinker, and her natural style is a dominant director. And she goes somewhat moderately negative under unfavorable situations. And we discussed it. And one of the things that was great is we came up with some processes and approaches for her because she's a C. She likes some structure. With a D, she wants to be able to see results pretty quickly. And what had happened was there's a certain situation where she is away from the particular healthcare unit for a little bit. And her typical approach before she'd be away would be to tell people or check on people what their lists are before she left. This time she didn't do any of it. Partway through on this, while she was away, she would also be following up and then having a checklist of things going back to the people. And what she did instead of her own preferred approach, she changed it. It was very uncomfortable for her, and she didn't do any of that. And when she came back, all the things that needed to be done were done and done very well, slightly different than she would have anticipated, but in some cases, even better. And she got feedback from her team that they were surprised they didn't hear from her and that
Wow.
they thought it was great and that they felt that it was her showing them more trust, that she trusted them. Her intention has never been not to trust. And this is the other thing we talk about, intention and impact. The majority of people's intent is not to create a situation of disturbance or disruption or something uncomfortable for somebody, but because of her preference and her needs, her actions were a certain way, which didn't line up with what she was hoping would be beneficial for the others. It actually was challenging the other people in ways that they didn't feel they needed to be challenged. But
Right.
this is to David's point, going back to the talent balance sheet, the three places that David put up were very important for people to understand. Effective emotions that David put up has to do with whether the person's more positive or negative. Yes, I can change that. But if I'm going to hire somebody, what does that look like?
Right.
Secondly, now he's taking, he was just putting up there on the values. Well, that is helping us get to the culture fit. How's that person going to meet our culture? And same with adaptability. Those three factors are the most important factors for when you're hiring and developing somebody in an organization. And you notice we didn't talk anything yet about job fit.
Right.
We talked about talent balance. What is the talent needed to achieve success and satisfaction in the organization? All too often, these lines get blurred between performance, meaning what that job is, and actually characteristic fit. What's the right character fit for the company?
Right. I think it's really important. I mean, I I love sports. I mean, I think that, sports organization executives have some of the hardest jobs in the world because they're so public.
Mm-hmm.
And if the decisions they make literally have cities, countries, states, you have it, looking at the decisions. But this is what they do. They have a whole team around them trying to figure out how to put the right pieces together to hopefully win a championship. Now, if you're the Utah Jazz, that's not your goal. Your goal is to lose every game and get last place, unfortunately. But it's okay. But it's, I always I loved, I think I did a talk one time talking about culture, and I put like the Moneyball approach, and I
Mm,
started talking about, I mean, not this exactly on the talent balance sheet, but talking about understanding, the people. And I think I used, DISC and Prodaptive is my basis, but it's so true. Cause I think there's so many organizations out there that don't really understand what their talent balance sheet is. Like, they've never done an audit. They've never looked at it. They think they have a feeling of it, but they've never really looked at it at a deeper level with 40 data points as this.
Yeah, and one of the things that it helps you do as well is when you look at it from a team perspective, you realize you don't need a team full of superstars. Just
Right.
had an organization the other day, and they're saying, "How do we get all A players in every position, every one of our 950 positions in the organization?" Well, you're not
Right.
going to. Have you
Right.
ever seen an organization full of Michael Jordans? Every single one of them? No,
No, I
not
mean,
at all. What
we
you
just
want is
saw what the Lakers, right? They try to stack the team. Didn't work.
you want you want
Didn't work.
complementary capabilities and motivations, not conflicting ones. And
Right.
so understanding how to put those teams and individuals together, your team will perform at a higher level with the Moneyball concept,
yeah.
right? You need people that work together. It's the 1980s hockey team, another example. That's a great example of someone who said, what talent do I have? How do I leverage the assets I have? And I've got some big liabilities, and we're clearly going up against the Russians, who their balance sheet was way stronger, right?
Right.
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 But who won? Because who knew how to manage their balance sheet better?
Right.
And again,
Absolutely.
there will be liabilities on every balance sheet, and it, just like a real balance sheet, debt's not necessarily a negative thing. Too much is.
Right.
Okay, so but used in
Yeah.
the
And I
right
think
place, it's very strategic and very helpful.
right. And understanding those, like, I mean, I call them like the role players, right? Like, they know their role. They're like I like how you put it. They're complementary. Like, they help support. They're there doing what they love to do. And if it has to do with, that fits the motivational boxes, that fits their capabilities boxes, and especially their style, they're happy, right? Like it's all great. But if, yeah,
Yeah.
like, you're right. If you get a bunch of 950s A superstars that think that their way, they're, maybe more me focused, they don't want to do it, they're, everything's about, what they want to do, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. We've seen it in sports team after sports team after sports team. It just doesn't work. And, and I think that this talent balance sheet, I think, is awesome. Where can people find this talent balance sheet?
Well, you can go to our website, and also you can reach out to us directly with this. And we can put this together for anybody. It doesn't take much time to get it organized and put together. We can do it for a team. We can do it for a division. We can do it for an entire organization. So we have the ability
I
to
love
do
that.
all of it.
I love that. Well, Leigh, David, thank you so much. This episode was awesome. I love it. It's one of my favorite things because I do get a little obsessed. That is where my, I like this. I don't like to put the numbers in the spreadsheet. I like to talk about it, where I love to talk about how to put the right pieces in the right seats. It's definitely one thing I've learned in my career because I don't feel like I did that the best. I set, a lot of myself up to fail and a lot of other people up to fail in a lot of different situations, a lot of different businesses. And so it's definitely something I'm working on myself all the time, making sure that I pay attention to this because I think it's very important. So, Leigh, David, thank you so much for this episode. If you like this episode, please share it. If you're interested in that talent balance sheet, go to potentia.solutions. They'll have it on there. If as always, hit me up at Jason Haugen on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm all over the place. And we'll see you on the next episode of Culturegram. Thank you.
Take care.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.